Welcome to Sustain This, a podcast where we discuss mindful consumption, personal style, and the quest for living a more intentional life. I'm Alyssa, a sustainable stylist.
And I'm Christina, a shopaholic turned minimalist-ish.
And I'm Signe, a color consultant and slow fashion style coach.
Together, we will unpack the nuances of what it really means to be a conscious consumer and find more joy in what we have right now. So grab your tea, your coffee, or whatever floats your boat and join us in the conversation. Let's go! Yay! Yay! Good morning, everyone. Hello again. Welcome to another episode. We got a really interesting question in our inbox, and it was all about style rules, and we thought we would dedicate an entire episode to it because there's a lot on the internet out there. I'm gonna, about style rules, and all of this content can be really helpful, but this was just such an interesting take. So Sigrid, thank you so much for your email. And for those of you, if you want to ask us questions like this, we get really into it on our online community, and we will be switching over from Patreon over to YouTube. So don't forget to check that out. We will keep you posted on how you can get more involved. But in the meantime, let's get back to this question. Sigrid is interested to explore if any of the style rules, quote unquote, are actually timeless or just applicable to the current winds of style. Can we see these rules being applied successfully on images from fashion that was considered on point in the past? Like if we're looking at the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and by style rules, she's thinking of things like balancing the proportions of your outfit, or the wrong shoe theory, or the rule of thirds, or contrasting textures, or even the sandwich rule for colors, or like the 3-color rule in an outfit. Those are all of the examples, and I'm sure there are more out there. I just found this to be so interesting. I know we've spoken about rules before, but what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on rules, and what do you think about this question?
I think she's probably right that it can be kind of connected to whatever's, I wouldn't necessarily say trendy, but like what is the contemporary way of dressing right now? I feel like trends are very short-lived, whereas, there are different kinds of trends. There's also just like the contemporary, quote unquote, contemporary way of dressing, which can be stretched over years, I think. And I think, I love style rules. I don't necessarily like the word rules or like rule. I don't necessarily look at them as rules, but I find them to be very helpful. For example, Alyssa, you mentioned before, what is 3-color rule? That's not necessarily something you've heard about. And I'm like, yeah, I love that rule. So it's like, okay, in short, it's you stick to a total of 3 colors in an outfit. And for me, I think it's a nice way to polish off my looks if I feel like something is a little bit off, or if it feels a little bit all over the place. So I use it more as tools than I use it as rules, really.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it, because rules sound so rigid, and like, especially when it comes to style and fashion, it when you say rule, it assumes that that's correct, like that's the correct way to dress, and that's just not, that cannot be applicable to absolutely everybody. So I think it's more like you say, use it as a tool. If something feels off, we talk about style as a feeling, and going back to it's always kind of starts with how you feel in your outfit versus how you want to feel, and then how the visuals in that outfit communicate that, how you create that connection. And you could call them principles, call them tools, but it's not going to apply to everybody all the time. And rules kind of imply, again, like that there's a right versus a wrong, and I don't think there is.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that before, that we always want there to be a straightforward answer to things, but they're just, your eyes might not see the same. Like if, for example, I follow a bunch of people on Instagram who will do like styling do's and don'ts, and sometimes I see the difference. It's like, hey, okay, yeah, I can actually see what you did there, and it might work better. But then it's all in the eyes of the beholder. Someone else might not agree with that, because it totally depends on what you're like you said, Christina, what you're looking to create. If you want to create more drama and tension, then you might not want to follow 3-color rule because it's too plain or whatever. It might be too polished for you. So I think different rules apply to different types of style personalities, and I think it's all about figuring out what kind of rules you want to have in your little styling toolkit. Having said that, I think it's nice to know what kind of tools you can, or like tricks you can try.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all has a place and a time.
Yeah.
Whether or not, I do agree with you. I feel like, because I'm thinking back to like fashion from, 40s and 50s. I guess that's what you would call like classic. And I think now with more, as you say, like modern contemporary styling. So for example, you might do like a shirt, a skirt, a little heel, and a bag. And that is all very classic and polished, and everything would be back at that time would be really tailored. It would fit well. There would be like no oversize, nothing, just very, very clean, polished, classic. Classic is the word that comes to mind. And then now it's really we really lean into things like contrast dressing. So if I was going to go like tailored or classic, I might want to try to like F that up a little bit with a weird shoe or a loud bag or an oversized element somewhere. And that would work really, really well today. So I think for me, I'm seeing like the leaning is way, like those rules, at least for me, help kind of steer away from feeling like one vibe in an outfit from head to toe, if that makes sense.
I thought I was actually just pulling up some photos, like vintage fashion. I was actually pinning a couple of looks from like Italy in the 80s last night. And
fun.
Cool.
Yeah, and like I just pulled up some like sewing patterns from the 60s. And what I find interesting is I think there are different quote unquote rules that are perhaps more contemporary versus some that are just general principles of design and art, like the rule of thirds. She uses the rule of thirds as an example, and I don't think that's necessarily a fashion rule. That's just literally what the eye likes to take in better, and that applies to things like architecture and interior decor and like all these other things. Photography. So I think.
Could you explain maybe to those who don't know what rule of thirds is?
Well, the rule of thirds, so the rule of thirds is just literally like, rather than splitting an image, if we're looking at photography or even like anything, the eye prefers things that are divided into thirds versus like a half. So it's just like when you're looking at it from an outfit perspective, it's like maybe a high waist and a long hem creates an outfit that is 2/3 on the bottom and like 1/3 on the top. So you're dividing your body in a way that is perhaps more
pleasing,
visually pleasing. Yeah. I'm doing this with giant quotation marks in my fingers as you're listening. So, and same thing with photos. Like if you're going to hang pictures on your wall, hang 3 pictures. There's really good photos of, like I've seen like really good images of interior decor with 2 big beautiful photos hanging beside each other.
Or like a Wes Anderson. Yes. Like Wes Anderson is really he's a film director. Think like what's a Wes Anderson movie? Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yeah.
So if you watch his compositions, a lot of them are very symmetrical down the middle, so that he doesn't utilize rule of thirds, so he almost breaks that rule. So versus if I were to frame something in the rule of thirds, I might, if you divide it into 9 squares, instead of it being in the middle, like Alyssa said, it might be to one side only with a lot of negative space on the other side. So you can, there's an example. You can embrace the rule or you can break it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's ultimately, I think, what it comes down to. And even when she's talking about a whole other different era, like the 40s, the 50s, and 60s, I'm sure there were people walking around whose belt and shoes and bag did not match. And like, whose, whatever
Shame.
rules were applied. And so I just think I like how you both said at the beginning they're more tools, not rules. But I do think it's really cool to know them and be well acquainted with these quote unquote rules, whether you consider them more elements of design or these just more fashion focused rules. I think they're so good to know because then you can break them.
It's so funny because it makes me think of like there's like almost like a little style war going on between millennials and Gen Z. I saw this TikTok yesterday of someone. It was a woman who was putting on. Here goes me explaining a TikTok, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I know.
I love it.
Cringe. But there's a woman who was like putting on. She was wearing gym leggings and then a oversized sweatshirt with like a big logo on it. And the text was trying to hide that I'm a millennial. And she put on like, you know, those little anklet socks with her sneakers.
The crew sock versus the
yeah. So, and she completely skipped those, and then she wore like high up the leg socks instead, because apparently that's what Gen Z does.
Yes.
So, and it's funny because we're kind of seeing a shift there. I think that's a great example of how, you know, the younger generations might not, you know, the rules, you know, we might have been told as millennials that is not flattering to wear like a higher sock because it's going to cut you off and your proportions are going to get
makes you look shorter.
Yeah, exactly. And the big bulky sneakers, you're going to look like way off balance. But it's kind of interesting to see that the younger generations are kind of mixing that up and, you know, breaking that quote unquote rule, if you will. So yeah, I think there are different, probably also different tools of styling for different generations, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think so for sure.
Yeah, like I found
big fan of the ankle
socks.
Also the whole like front tuck. Should I do front tuck?
Oh
or
yeah,
not?
Like, no.
Something is missing. Anymore. What a millennial would do, they would do a front tuck.
I thought that was. I saw that one. That was hilarious.
That's hilarious.
That's funny. Yeah.
I thought the balancing proportions question was interesting. Like, because it's true, we talk a lot about balancing proportions. Also, like, my mom is the one who taught me about balancing proportions, and she probably learned that from her mom. So that's kind of like, again, I think that's one of those, just like, do you like things that feel harmonious, or do you like it when things are like a little bit, I don't know.
Do you have any like that you almost use daily or that you swear by? Any like styling tools? Maybe not, you know, maybe subconsciously or...
I don't know. I think the first thing I always adjust is like, usually I just put whatever I want on, and then that's when these things come into play. So the first thing I always check is like the proportions. It's like if something feels off, it's usually for me the proportions are off.
Yeah.
But that's the only one. Like I would never... I know the sandwich rule. Like,
what is that? Sorry, like, because I've seen it in a few different. I know it's like, you know, you match your top to your shoes or something.
Yeah, I think that's
it.
I think
like matching your belt to the
belt to the shoe, or like or your top to the shoe.
I thought there was another, like, there's that interpretation, and I think there's something else.
Ooh. Oh yeah, there's also, I think you can do it with proportions as well. So if you're wearing oversized on the top, you can wear like bulkier on the bottom and then something skinnier in between. I have to admit, I know it's kind of cringe, but I kind of like that rule. I do kind of like it, but that's because it's a fun way for me to play with proportions, but also just it's kind of similar to 3-color rule. I feel like it's a nice way to polish off my look if I feel like, oh, something isn't matching or something is a little bit off or not, you know. Yeah.
I just want, I don't know. I liked her. Yeah. I don't know. Christina, is there a rule that you apply?
Yeah, I think definitely more to proportion. Like I'm a big fan of like I keep talking about it because I'm a big fan of like the Tibby style principles. So when we're talking about proportion, I use that big slim skin a lot. So they kind of talk about it more like it's not it's to create shapes and movement in the body, and not necessarily to find like what's most flattering, but because there's nothing wrong with going big, just as much as there's nothing wrong with going slim, if it feels good to the wearer. So this is always how it feels to the wearer. So when I'm doing it, I really like to, I love my oversized blazer, or I like a baggier pair of jeans. So that could be my big. And then my slim, I usually will bring in with a shoe or like a bodysuit or a tank top. And then skin could be rolling up the sleeves. But I find I really need skin showing around my chest these days. I find like a more closed neckline, unless it's a turtleneck, a little bit more challenging, and I feel a bit too covered whenever I do that. So I like to bring in a lot of skin around my chest. and in my shoe a lot too. So like through a ballet flat or like a little strappy sandal or something. And that for me just gives some breathing room and doesn't make me feel so heavy, because I find I have like, in proportion, I still think some people think I look tall. I feel like I look short, and I have shorter legs and like they're thicker, more athletic legs. So I find like if I don't balance it out with like a slimmer shoe or have some skin somewhere, I just feel really like condensed. And I don't feel like my best when I do that. So that's the principle that I use.
I really like the big slim skin also, because it's like, it's not so strict, because you get to decide where you want to have
the big
and where
and the
you
slim
want to
and
have.
the,
Yeah, exactly. I kind of like that.
Yeah. And if you're like fully covered, for example, but wearing like a bodysuit or like a cat suit, that could give like the illusion of skin, you know what I mean? So it doesn't necessarily always have to be, you can like you said, you bend the rule, you bend the principle. But I find too, like when I really stick to style rules, it makes me feel anxious when I'm getting dressed, because like my mind will just immediately kind of go to like, oh, what's wrong here? What's, you know, and or this isn't right, or I need to add one more thing because this rule says so. And I'm like, it's not as fun to me, what I find, because I love rules and I love, you know, I love the black and white binary easy thinking. But it stresses me out sometimes.
Yeah, I guess some days you just want to wear whatever and not have to tuck your freaking top if that's not what you're
doing. Exactly. Yeah.
I wonder, I'm just looking at the question, like, are style rules timeless? And I'm wondering if Sigrid is asking the question because now there is so much more freedom in what we can wear. And also with social media, like anyone can kind of say what they want. So they're giving their like quote unquote rules or tricks. Whereas if we look back to, you know, her question was, were these considered on point in the past, the 20s, 40s, 50s, 60s? The environment was so different. Like, and also dressing was so much more prescribed. Like, you wear these, like this silhouette is on
this
trend,
is appropriate,
and this is
not.
appropriate.
And there were like societal hierarchies and like you know, the common person versus like the more elite, for example, well-to-do, proper, like, you know, proper dressing versus common, etc. Working class versus upper class, that type of thing.
And there just weren't as many options out there, you know, like, so maybe there wasn't as much freedom, and now it's almost like we're trying to go back and be like, okay, wait, like there's so
too much.
That's interesting. That's fascinating.
Try this.
Kind of like the closet full of clothes but nothing to wear, just like we have too many options and it's too much.
So I don't know. I wonder if that's, I don't know. Sorry, that's a little bit of a tangent.
That's interesting.
I just,
because it's like almost when you have no rules, it feels too chaotic almost.
Yeah.
That
I guess that's why I kind of like having again, I don't want to call it rules, but then at the same time, when you say rules, people know what you know, they know what you mean, you know they're effective too. You know. So and that's the same way I feel about color analysis sometimes, because you know, again, that's still very much a hot topic, and I've stumbled upon like content or like people online being like, yeah, I did my own analysis, and don't waste your money on professional, or just wear whatever you want. And it's like, yeah, it's all well and good, but what if you don't know what you want? Like, what if you don't know what you like? It's good. Isn't it good to have some guidance, and then you can decide from there?
Yeah, because sometimes it's frustrating going to the color analysis thing, for example, like if you know you like pale beige, and then every time you buy it or put it on, it doesn't feel right, and you don't really know why. So then you try a different shade of pale beige, and then you try another one, or you try a mustard, and then
or just
like,
another style, maybe. Like another,
and you're taking yourself in like the wrong direction. But it's like, it's frustrating. What I'm trying to get at is like, there's always this like sense of frustration every time you're putting something on and you don't really know what it is. So I do think that's helpful.
Yeah, that's where the tools can really help you.
I think it's also like a self-trust thing too, right? Like something feels off, or maybe you, I don't know, like to your point, Christina, you're looking and you're trying to find something and it's not working. It's almost like having someone come in and be like, this is why it's not working and here's what you can do. You're like, oh, okay, I was right. I just needed someone to be like,
and I think
no, you're on the
actually
right
the
track.
Interesting thing is that people often know deep down.
Of course.
Like it's the same way sometimes when I have both for like style clients, but especially for color analysis, it's like I don't think I've had a client that left my studio being like, this is so unexpected. Like I did not expect that at all. I think people know deep down, you kind of just get it confirmed. And I think that's always nice. And then you can move on from there. Yeah.
But I mean, even with that, like I think people, once you get your colors, it's like you kind of look at it like, this is my color palette and I can't stray outside of it at all. And these are now my rules. And then I think that's when it, again, it's a great helpful guideline, but I have some lighter shades in my, like for you, like Sina color type to me is a deep, cool and clear. And I have warm tones in my wardrobe. I have lighter shades rather than more saturated shades in my wardrobe. And I still wear that stuff, but like, if I don't feel 100% in it, or if it feels slightly off, I have at least a better understanding as to why, but I still wear it.
Yeah. Just as I wear black, black is not my color at all, theoretically, but I love black,
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
It's what you want from it.
Oh my God, I'm so glad that black is in my color palette.
As she like hugs her blazer to her body. I love it. Okay, cool. I don't know. So like, I'm so curious, what are your final thoughts? Like, do you think these quote unquote rules are universal? Like, do you think in 20 years you'll be telling your, like, Sina, will you tell your daughters like, oh, hey, like maybe
Style
you want to balance out your...
You're like, no, mommy, I'm hungry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for breakfast. I don't know. Like, are these rules that are universal, and do they transcend, actually Sigrid asked the question, do they transcend styles? Actually, that's not just time and eras, and actually that's kind of a totally different angle that we haven't yet explored. I'm gonna say yes, it doesn't matter your style, and that these are tools that you can apply no matter what. Like you can balance proportions no matter what, whether you prefer classic or retro or super contemporary. I think so too. I personally think so. Christina,
I don't know. Yeah, I'm thinking of like, okay, in my head I'm picturing like a kind of tomboy femme style where they tend to wear more, like she might wear like a baggy jersey and then baggy Bermuda shorts and then chunky loafers, but the proportion might be like showing the leg and like showing your arm, so there's like the slim and the skin kind of thing, or they might wear like their hair in a tight bun and that's more of like a slim. And then in my head I'm thinking like 70s bell bottoms, but the way bell bottoms were back then, it's like they were kind of skinny and then they went out quite a bit, so that's like a proportion in itself too, right? Or it used to be like a slimmer top, the big bell bottom pants, and then huge chunky platforms. Like my dad would talk about, he would say, he's like, I used to wear shoes like this high back in the 70s, you know what I mean? So, but that to me is still a way of dressing proportionally. So I do see that, but I don't know if were we thinking about that at the time? I'm not sure.
Yeah, good question.
Or were we thinking more about like that was the thing, like that was what was trending?
What we wear.
Yeah, that's what was cool. That was fashion, and
yeah. It's gonna be interesting to see where we are like 20 years from now. If we're craving, if we're back to like a uniform more for more of us, or if we're. It's funny to think about like how far can we stretch it, because the lines are so blurred now.
Yeah,
is it gonna continue that way, or are we gonna get back to something a little bit more strict?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I'm thinking about like, a lot of people don't work in an office anymore. They work from home. And do you even get dressed if you work from home?
Yeah.
Like, are you in sweatpants all day? That type of thing. Or for example, like the rise of athleisure. One thing I see so much, mostly from younger people, I think like they're in high school, but like I feel like the high school uniform is little tank top, baggy sweatpants, and UGG boots or Nike Air Force Ones. And like literally everybody wears that. So I'm like, yes, where are we going in fashion? I don't know.
Where are we going indeed?
Yeah.
But if they like it,
Great
fine.
question.
Love it,
Yeah.
you do you. Sorry, I'm not shitting on anybody. I'm just saying that's a pattern that I'm seeing.
I mean, so I don't know. My verdict is that yes, I think these transcend style and time, because I see them more as like just basic artistic principles, but I also don't see them as rules.
Well, sorry, I don't want to conclude it yet because like we haven't touched on a lot. We haven't touched on like, for example, okay, don't wear white after Labor Day. Like when did that rule come into?
Right. I didn't
like
even
what are
think
some
of
like what are
those
some
kinds
other
of
style rules? Like
or
don't
like
mix
black and navy blue.
black and navy or black and brown together. Like
right. And those are all outdated now. And we've totally changed that.
Yeah.
So, okay, great point. Great point. We are not finished. Now I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to think.
No, I think basically maybe when we conclude it that way, it's like I think there's some maybe when you talk about it as a principle of design and art, like maybe those are more timeless versus these weird like arbitrary rules that came from the 80s and 90s that maybe that was more like we talk a lot about style versus fashion. So maybe those rules are more fashion focused, more current, more of the time rather than like a global kind of universal principle.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. I love that. Yes. Because like she mentions, I like how like there's the more fashion and then the more, I think that's genius.
Because it's not a principle we have here. I've had people comment sometimes if I've been wearing white jeans, like, what are your thoughts on wearing white after Labor Day? And I'm
everybody,
like, what?
Yeah.
Why is this a thing?
Is it just because it's like, is it something to do with the season or I don't know.
Why can't you wear white after Labor Day?
Is it not practical or?
I'm looking it up right now. In the early 1900s, those who were well-to-do often favored lightweight, bright clothing, white linen suits, and breezy dresses. Wearing white after Labor Day meant you were someone who had the means to have an end of summer vacation. Wearing white.
I knew it was bougie. I knew it had roots in being bougie.
This is from farmersalmanac.com. Wearing your whites beyond Labor Day was showing off.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Oh,
okay.
Never mind. I was wrong. It's not about being bougie at all. Wow, that's interesting.
When is Labor Day?
It's like the first weekend of September usually.
Oh, okay.
I mean, so here in North America, it could be another.
Wow.
I'm trying to think if we have like similar rules here.
Yeah. Or are they all
really?
Sina's in Denmark, if you guys didn't know. Are you looking it up?
Are you looking that
I hear you typing.
I mean, I'm actually working on like some more like Danish style content.
Yeah.
I think the only like Danish like but that's just common dress code, I think, is like, because I think we often confuse, okay, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but if you look up like the French inspired wardrobe, for example, it will be very similar to the Scandinavian inspired wardrobe. So you have the straight like jeans and the t-shirt and the classic shirt and the trench coat, like very similar pieces. But I think like one very common thing is like the exaggerated contrast that we see here, because people make functionality such a core part of their wardrobes rather than just a side note. So it's not uncommon to see someone wearing like tailored pieces with like chunky running shoes, for example. I think that's not really like a dressing rule. I think that's just common.
It's like the theme that you see. Yeah. Well, in Copenhagen, everyone was so chic. I loved it.
Cool. I liked how playful they were. Sorry, I'm talking about it, like how playful Scandi style is.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I definitely think it doesn't have to be that like stereotypical minimal quote unquote Scandi style that I've definitely noticed a shift over the years. Like you say, people are a little bit more playful and like colorful too, I think.
Yeah. Lots of color.
Yeah.
That was cool. No, I love that. And I thought it was just the fact that sorry, I have to say one last bit, like the point where you were saying how someone could be wearing tailored trousers with a sneaker, like the functionality. I thought sneakers with like dresses and stuff came in. I thought that was really popular in like 2012, 2011. Like that's when I saw that look really coming out. But like in my little research yesterday when I was like pinning inspiration, there's a really great picture from the 80s of a girl walking around in Rome, and she's got this beautiful sundress, little ribbon in her hair, and a pair of like, I don't know if it's Adidas Gazelles or Superstars. And I'm like, this could literally have been taken yesterday.
Yeah.
So I don't even...
Well, I think because maybe in the 80s that was like an original iteration,
true.
And now because style is so cyclical, and I think actually right now we're taking a lot of nods from the 80s in today's fashion right now, right? And then it'll be 90s again, and then it's going to be the early aughts, which is insane to me that even the early 2000s was trending in like the in 2020. Wow.
Y2K, yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. Blows my mind. Yeah. So I think, like who wore it first, you know?
Yeah. But it wasn't so much about the shoe, it's about the styling. Like I didn't, to me in the 80s, they were all still like, I wouldn't have put that combination together.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, style rules, style principles. I think at the end of the day, it's like, can it transcend? Yes and no, I think is what we concluded from the conversation. But when it comes to those, I think it's like, apply what's helpful to you and don't get hung up on them, because I feel like that's when getting dressed is no longer fun if all we focus on are the rules.
Yeah. Fully. Well said.
All right, besties. Thank you for listening. Join the YouTube membership. We'll just have a link in the show notes that simply says join. So if you want to join us, how many more times can I say join? We'll see you over there for some bonus content and ask us anything, and where we can reply directly to your comments and all of that good stuff. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Yay.
Bye.
Ciao, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining in our conversation this week. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple and leave us a rating and review. It's one of the best ways to support the Sustain This podcast at zero cost to you.
We're also a community-led podcast, so if you have any questions for us, topic requests, or even guests you want to hear from, please send us a DM on Instagram at sustainthis_podcast. We read all of our comments and look forward to hearing from you.
We hope you join us again next Tuesday, where we'll talk about so much more than clothes. Ciao!